everybody, Martin Gilmore here. I got some questions the other day about my gear and the stuff that I use, so I thought I'd do a quick gear rundown on the stuff that you see in most of my videos, and just kind of give everybody a heads up in case folks were interested. This is the guitar that I use mostly for my videos and stuff here on YouTube. This is a 00018, 1938 00018, and it's pretty nice. It's been reworked and refinished, so it's not like one of the super collectible 00018s from that era, but it sounds nice and it's small body. I use it a lot of times if I'm teaching online or doing online stuff because it's not so big. I also have a D-18 from 1996, a D-18S that I a lot of times will play on stage. It's kind of my main gigging guitar, but I generally don't use it during lessons or during the day just because it's a lot of like hiking my shoulder up to get over the big body guitar. It has a slotted peg head, which means it has kind of holes in the peg head and the string spool around that, which looks really cool, and a lot of people comment on it and they like it, but I actually probably prefer the peg heads like this with the posts, because if I break a string or have a problem with the string, I can just pull it straight off the post versus that D-18 where I have to unspool the whole thing. If you watch some of the videos, you could see that other guitar in a few of them. I do use it from time to time, but mostly what you see is this 00018 because it's always here and easy to grab, and it's nice and small, and I like playing it. Gives me a chance to play it. I barely ever take this one out to play any gigs just because it's old and it's small, and the D-18 is louder. Most of the time, the picks that I use, I prefer the Wegens. I like the 140s, the triangle 140s. They're big, they're not much flex, big triangle picks. I've used those for years, but I do have some others that I use just depending on the situation. You know, different picks have different feels to them. They have different sounds to them. They might not necessarily communicate across the YouTube universe, but on stage, sometimes I'll use my ToneSlab. This is a ToneSlab triangle. I've had an array of Bluechips over the years, but I don't really have one that I use regularly. I do use a Primetone. I've worn the label off this, but this is a Primetone pick. Again, a big triangle one. I just like the surface area of the triangle pick. It kind of helps it stay in my hand. I don't have to grip it really hard. And I play with picks that have no flex. I like really stiff picks because it gives me a lot of control over the grip. I can hit the bass notes really hard. I can loosen my grip and give a good strum. So if you want to, I would encourage anybody who wants to play bluegrass or who wants to get a variety of sounds out of their guitar to use a thick pick. Thicker than a millimeter, something with no flex. But most of the time I use these Wegen picks, which I really like. They're not paying me for any endorsement, but I'll endorse them anyways because that's what I generally like. The other thing that I really like about them is that they are easy to find when you drop them on stage. Like this one, if the stage is black and you drop your Primetone on stage, it might take you a second to notice it. And then the ToneSlab is okay. It's kind of red. If it was bright red, it might even be better. But I like this one. If I drop it in the dirt at the Bluegrass Festival, or drop it on stage or wherever, it's usually pretty easy to find. These days I kind of just do like finger picking. I'll do hybrid picking where I use the pick as basically the thumb pick, hold it like a flat pick, and pick with these two fingers. I don't do anything fancy with my fingernails, though maybe I should. I kind of have wimpy fingernails, and they don't really grab very good, and so a lot of times I just kind of use the fleshy part of my finger to grab if I'm picking. I don't use the fingernails. Mostly because I don't want to maintain them, but I have lots of friends who do the fingernails and they go have them put on. But that's generally if I'm finger picking, I just switch back and forth because it's easy, and then I can switch back to the strumming if I want to. When I do use finger picks, which I do from time to time, this is kind of what I prefer. I like these Goldengate clown barf pink picks. Again, same thing. If I drop it on the ground, it's easy to find. I used to use Nationals, like the National brown plastic finger picks, which the loop is really comfortable on those as well, but I had a lot of problems with them, like breaking right here. I think it was just the way, like I keep them in my pocket, so I think I was just wearing them out, and maybe it was the way that I was playing with them. But I still really like those picks. I just haven't used them as much. And again, if you drop them, which happens, they're hard to find, and I generally don't like to be looking around for my pick when I'm standing at the microphone. So I usually use these bright pink ones. And then I use National NP2s or something like that. I use big, thick, heavy finger picks when I do that, and I kind of adjust the loop. I've used all sorts of finger picks over the years, Dunlop's Pro Picks, but I prefer the National NP2 styles or NP1s, or honestly, I'm not really super brand loyal. I just like this style of pick. You can see it. It's hard to see when I hold it. That doesn't even have a label. This is probably NP1, I would guess. That's kind of what I prefer when I'm finger picking. As far as strings, I'm not very picky about strings. I generally use just Phosphor Bronze of any brand. I don't really have a brand loyalty. I'm lucky my hands don't kill strings. I know some people, like, as soon as they touch their guitar strings will be dead. I'm fortunate that that doesn't happen to me, so I don't use coated strings or anything. I remember years ago I bought a bunch of boxes of Diodario's. I've been using those for a long time. I use Martin strings. I've used GHS strings, but I like Phosphor Bronze strings. I don't like the 8020s. I think they're too bright. I prefer the Phosphor Bronze. On this guitar I use lights, and on my Dreadnought I use mediums, and that's pretty much it in terms of that. The Capos, I've always preferred these kind of Capos. I think that they have a good... they apply the pressure straight down. I have a couple of them. This one's an Elliot, and the other one that I have is the same as an Elliot capo as well. I've used Paige capos over the years, which are kind of that same clamp design. But I like these because you can adjust the tension and it applies the pressure straight down on the strings. If you can afford the Elliot capos, they're really, really nice. But the Paige capos, in my opinion, are just as good. I've also used Shubbs over the years. I prefer capos where I can adjust the tension. That way, like the spring-loaded capos are fast, but they just grab a hold of the strings, and capos are bad about pulling your guitar out of tune anyhow, and I feel like those spring-loaded ones are even worse. And I used to work at a guitar shop, and people would come in with their guitar and they were using those spring-loaded capos, and there would be like divots in the back of their neck where those spring-loaded capos had been. So I prefer not to do that. And I just store my capo right up here over the nut. My hand bumps into it sometimes, but I've kind of gotten used to it. And that's the way. Tuners, I have recently got the Polytune tuner, which I really like. That's pretty nice. But I've for a long time used tuners on my phone. I have used different tuner apps. Your phones these days have such good microphones that a lot of times you can get really good tuners off of those. I've kind of gone away from the Snark tuners. I know those are probably pretty old. Most people aren't using those, but I generally haven't ever really liked those that much. Though I used them for a long time. I guess the nice thing about them is they were easy to read, and they weren't terribly expensive, and I had a bunch of them. But I like the Polytune. It's nice, and I've been using that one. Same thing with the phone tuner. I don't even know what apps I've used. Maybe I'll do a video sometime about the music apps that I use regularly. But any tuner on the phone I find is pretty good, just because the microphone on the phone these days is pretty good. And that's kind of my gear rundown. If you have any other questions, put them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. That kind of gets everybody up to speed. If you want to get started with the Martin Gilmore setup, a Wegen pick, one of those capos, Phosphor Bronze strings. You've got it. I don't know why anybody would want, but there's the answers. Thanks so much. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave your comments down below. See ya.